Welcome to another edition of the Gaming Careers Podcast, the resource for people looking to find their fit in the gaming industry. On this show, you will hear game industry professionals talk about how they succeed in today's competitive environment and how you can do the same. I'm Steve Rudusky, your host, and thanks again for joining me. Today we have an amazing guest with us on the show. We have legendary game designer Zeb Cook with us. Zeb, thank you so much for being with us on the show today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
We're really excited to have you on. So for our listeners that may not be familiar with you, can you give us just a broad overview about who you are and where you fit into the gaming space?
Oh, okay. I'll try to keep this short.
Yeah, just the peak.
I started basically making games in 1979. I started on the paper game side at TSR working on Dungeons and Dragons. And I worked there for 15 years, wrote the AD&D second edition rule books, and wrote a lot of other module things and designed games for them. I won't even go through the whole list of all those things. And then after about 15 years of that, I basically kind of said I'd done pretty much about all I could do in the role-playing game stuff, I felt like. So I got an offer to go work in video games. That's in 94. And there was, at that point, people had just discovered CD-ROM games and this sort of thing, and they were the latest hot thing. And so it was a new challenge, and I went over to work for a little company that basically folded before they ever got their really anything out. And then moved around to different companies, worked at Interplay on some of the Fallout series, and what else? Cryptic Studios for as lead on City of Villains MMO. Basically, moving around, kind of moved eventually into the MMO kind of space, which is where I have kind of settled into and enjoy making them. They're incredibly complicated, all this sort of stuff. And so that's now I'm at Zenimax Online working on the Elder Scrolls Online game. And that's kind of a nutshell, where I'm at and kind of how I got to there. In that, I've also done, through that, a lot of writing, a lot of team leading, scripting, all the kind of various tasks that designers wind up having to deal with on the video game side.
Excellent. And for our listening audience, just type in Zeb Cook into your browser there, and you'll just get tons and tons of information. So thank you for those highlights. If you want to do more research, definitely dive in. So starting with RPGs, your career path, you've done a lot of different things. Was there a conscious choice from switching from RPGs into kind of the video game space, or was it just the natural progression of your career?
It was both. Like I said, I had been working at TSR for a long time to that point, and I was their senior designer, and I could have stayed there for pretty much as long as, I really wanted to. But a friend of mine contacted me and said basically there was an opportunity, and it was the conscious choice in that I really felt like, that role-playing games were not going to keep, we're not going to be the next big thing. They had already had their next big thing. And so I wanted to kind of go, follow the trend or, get in front of the trend, as it were. So that was part of it. And the other part of it was basically, it was a better offer, and it was just the right thing to do at the time. And so it was both choice and opportunity.
Sure. And you mentioned something just there that I'd like to focus on a little bit. I am a big RPGer. I have the second edition RPG, Dungeons and Dragons in front of me. I have Book of Artifacts right in front of me. So, that's kind of my growing up game of choice. Now, are RPGs on their way out? I know that's a, past 10-year question, but You mentioned that they're not the next big thing. Have RPGs seen their day in the sun?
Well, they're never going to be gone. That's the great part about these things. They'll always be, they're not just, building ever bigger and bigger audiences. there's only a certain size that they're going to get to, and I think that, that's pretty much it. So, I don't think they're on their way out. That's a terrible thing to say.
Oh, I would agree as well, seeing that now that's my game of choice. But I think that a lot of gamers out there kind of have that opinion of RPGs, and whether it's, mobile gaming or video gaming or, internet gaming opportunities as a way of kind of reclaiming that social encounter that maybe RPGs once filled. I do worry that RPGs might be on their way out.
As long as people want to get together face to face, until it's going to take quite a while for anything on like the video game side to actually be able to really completely knock them out, because there's whole aspects of that the technology can't touch yet.
Sure. Now, so if somebody did, like, if I'm wanting to jump into the RPG space, and I'm behind the wagon, and I'm still making buggy whips, and I want to jump into that as my primary career, what advice do you have for somebody that might want to start in that avenue? Do you start by publishing in your own studio or publishing house, or do you try to get associated with a established publisher?
Probably easiest, especially these days, with there's a lot of online publishing you can do and PDF kind of things. And those are probably easiest is to just start, create your own thing, but something that's interesting, fun, all that sort of stuff, and then go through the process of, getting it laid out, getting it formatted, getting it into putting it into a PDF or an e-reader download format, these sorts of things. Then there are basically sites and services, everything from, you can think big to like, Google or Amazon or anything like that, but there's also a lot of RPG dedicated sites that will basically, work out arrangements for hosting your stuff and selling it through their store and that sort of stuff. But, you obviously have to sell them on it, but that's basically the way a lot of people start.
Sure. Do you know of any of those RPG dedicated sites offhand?
I think it would be, let me do a real quick, I think it's RPG Now is the name. One that I just go to them. RPG Now, leading source for Indian RPGs is definitely a good one. And there are a couple others that I can't, the minute you ask me.
Sure. And if they
I can certainly forget.
Well, sure. And if they occur to you over the course of the interview, please feel free to shout them out, and I'll make sure that those resources are available to our listeners in the show notes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So when I was doing my poking around online, I saw that you were the third designer to be hired on full time at TSR by going through their design test. Can you tell me a little bit about what that design test was like?
Oh my God, the design test was pretty amusing in some ways. Now, way back then, nobody knew what designers were going to do really, or what we needed to know. And so the design test was about 20 some questions that I'm assuming Gary or somebody had put together of basically testing your knowledge of everything from obscure medieval weaponry that might have been featured in the Dragon magazine article at some point, so to the various rules and game systems, and a lot of things like that. That were like, I suppose that's potentially useful information for judging whether somebody's a designer. But the really important part of it was that they asked for a writing sample.
Okay.
So, write a little short, a short adventure. And so, that part of the test was the really important thing to do.
Sure. Okay, so if you were to design a test that was similar to that, kind of for aspiring game designers today, what might you include in that test?
Well, I would definitely be wanting to see a writing sample at this point, because it really is, how well can you write, how clear can you be, this sort of things. For other stuff, it's the other aspects probably would put up some questions about basically, how would you deal with a situation like if you were running a game or if you were creating a game? How would you handle the typical, like, the bad player or the power gamer, or what kind of, how do you, and so I can get a sense of how their mind thinks through dealing with a lot of the social interaction stuff, the issues that players have all the time when they do RPG games and that sort of stuff, and then also probably a little bit of math.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Because you're a designer, you're going to have to work out formulas. You're going to have to work out, you're going to have to work out how your combat works, and and it's not complicated math or anything, but it's more important is just put in some puzzles and some problem kind of things for people to then solve and kind of explain how they solved it. Because then you can kind of get a sense of how the person's mind works through this sort of stuff, and so do they understand probabilities and all these sorts of things? Because those are the little things that trip people up.
Oh, okay. So I guess what I'm hearing there is that there is a little bit of a difference in skill set between just somebody that can author a great story versus somebody that can manifest that story for players, so that game design aspect.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there are lots of people, and this is the horrible thing that we tell people, that ideas are cheap, and you hear that, you hear, screenwriters tell people that, all this sort of stuff, but, the idea is the easy part in many ways, but it's the execution. It's the knowing how to put something together, and, making sure they understand that, this is a game. It's going to have very different kind of things from just a good story. It needs to basically be something that, if it goes off the rails, and if the players go off the rails in some direction, that there are ways to accommodate and handle that they don't feel like they're just being pushed in one direction all the time, or pushed towards one style of play, and those sorts of things. Games are about letting the players have input, and so how do you build those systems into your game?
Interesting. Okay, so with that in mind, how is designing for a tabletop RPG different from designing for the MMO space? Because I know that you want to kind of create similar experiences, but a video game has to be on rails to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, that alone is probably one of the biggest differences. It's that, in a paper RPG, I could be very broad at times. I could say, okay, well, here's a system to solve all the other things that we never thought of, kind of things, like that. And I could create a game with a skill system, confident in the knowledge that basically, I could end it up with a couple of paragraphs that would say, and if, your players try to do something else unexpected, here's how you think up a new skill, and here's how you would incorporate it into your game.
Sure.
Can't do that.
Okay.
Once you go to the MMO, that sort of thing, everything has to be there. The only things that they can do are, the things that you have laid out, the choices that you've given, and these sorts of things. And so you can't rely on somebody fudging the numbers. You can't rely on, a GM essentially, kind of saying, I can improvise through this little problem. And at the same time, players want to have that, that broad range of kind of choice and interactivity. And so you have to be the person who thinks about all that stuff and figures out, how do we give them as much of that as possible without just killing our company? Because, everything you want to do takes time, effort, and money to basically get it done.
Sure.
And so, you have to make choices like, we're not going to let people do that in this game. The other big thing that's really different between the paper RPG space and the MMO is that as a designer on an MMO, I'm very much dependent on a lot of other people at that point. I, kind of in some ways, you only design about 50% of the game yourself, as it were, because everything else is like, okay, the interface has got to be put together by somebody. The art really makes a big difference. We've got the audio guy over here who has to get his input into it and all that sort of thing. We got the engineers have to basically say, yes, this idea you have actually can be implemented and is not as mad as a hatter. And on top of that, they're all creative people, and they also, it's their game too. So
Sure.
it's a much more collaborative kind of an operation. So when I was doing a paper, when I was doing like even second edition, I would go off in a room and I would write a whole bunch of stuff, and then I'd go and bring it back out, and a lot of people would beat it up and all that sort of thing and provide feedback and all that. But it was me just making a lot of these decisions and moving forward. And when you do a module, you pretty much go off, you spend however much time it takes to write the module, and you come back and you play it and you say, okay, hey, that worked, good. And then you write up some art orders, and an artist makes pictures for you.
Nice, very nice. And I would imagine for the video game space, you have that whole big money thing happening as well, which is that a whole money constraint of keeping the entire party going, or the whole party, listen to how I'm talking, the entire company going at the same time. So yes, we want all of these creative people involved, but there's salaries to be paid at the end of the day, and we can't do that broad vision because it will be too expensive to manifest. Whereas in tabletop RPGs, it's just an imagination engine, yeah?
It is definitely part of the thing that you have to think about anytime you're working on a video game is, invariably what the kind of the thing, and I've actually been brought into companies, I've brought into at least one company where in the interview they asked me how I was at cutting things because they had a design that they simply couldn't implement.
Yeah.
And so one of my jobs is to try and help figure out, like, okay, well, what do we do? How do we resolve that problem? What can we get rid of, or what, how do we, throw out, change completely, rework, what really matters. So yes, when you're sitting down with an MMO or any kind of video game, invariably the first thing you do is you kind of come up with this is the game we want, and everybody has this kind of, vision, and you get everybody gradually onto that same track. And then it becomes a matter of, putting a list of all the features you want. You've got the designers and the things that they want to do. You've got the art people and the things that they want, because that all takes time and money too. The audio guys will probably have a couple of technical things and some cool things that they want to have. And then there's the engineering side of all of this, and a lot of it all comes down to everybody then has to, the leads and the directors or whatever have to get together and basically go through all of that and start working out, like, okay, how much effort do you think we think that's going to take? And they get as good as an informed amount of information as they can, and they say, and then it becomes like, wow, that seems like that won't be too bad to do, and another one will be like, oh my God, that's going to take a year just to get that thing implemented.
Sure.
And then you have to look at, like, well, is that something we really have to have? Yeah, I guess we do. All right. Then we have to basically dedicate resources to that, for whatever X amount of time. And, if you look at then how many resources do we have available? What are their skill sets? And you start matching things up. And as you get closer and closer to your deadline and all this sort of stuff, the decisions become much harder, because it's like, oh, that thing that we said took a year, that took a year and a couple more months.
Right.
Or, it all, that impacts everything else down the line, that sort of thing. And so towards the end, it's like, we really thought that would be a great thing, but no, we can't get it in. And also, you're at that point, you finally get to the point where things are coming together and you can actually play them. And then it's like, oh, this doesn't actually play the way we thought it would.
Right.
And we've got to go back and change something. And so that's another cost factor you have to figure in. So, yeah. And on paper games, yes, you don't run into that as much, but one of the things we always had to deal with, like when we were doing a box set or even a book, was there were still cost constraints. It's like, how many pages can we print?
Sure.
Can I have 4-color printing? Is this going to be hard bound? Do I get to throw in any extra maps? Anything like that. And because those would all basically count towards the cost of goods. And, you basically, work with a printer to get the estimates for all of that. And then you'd say, like, oh, look, this is now costing too much in terms of goods per box. So we can't do that. We have to say you don't get to 4-color printing, or you don't get to have 2 full-size maps, or whatever.
Interesting. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, because I think first-time game designers, whether it's for the tabletop space or for a video game space like indie developers, there is the risk of trying to plan too much and creating this huge game that they have in their mind. Do you have some tips on how to cut back to be able to actually launch a product for the first time for designers that haven't gone through that process before?
Well, I think it's kind of a threefold, three tips. Kind of what I have. One is sit down and price out your materials, price out what it will actually cost to produce the thing, and therefore what would you have to sell it for to try and make it at least break even. It's nothing else, right?
Right.
You don't want to lose money on the whole deal.
Sure.
And start from that, and then basically especially first time, start small. Don't try to do the biggest thing to it first. Start small, because you're going to discover all sorts of unexpected problems and things you didn't know. And so, build yourself some small stuff, get some experience, and then go off and try and do that, the bigger, more ambitious thing that maybe you wanted to start to do right from the start. The other advice is basically the same advice I give, to a lot of people, maybe not quite so true for me anymore, but there's always another game. As you sit down and go, start trying to throw all this stuff in, just remember, wait, that's a great idea, but there'll be another game I can use that idea in. I don't have to put everything into one game. And in fact, it'll probably be a bad game if you do.
Okay. I think that's great advice.
Focus and, be small.
Keep your focus, do the cost analysis first, and remember that all of your creativity doesn't have to live in one game. That's very cool. All right, so you've been in the gaming industry for a large number of years. What are some of the highlights in the career development that you've had that you would like to share with listeners?
Well, basically the biggest highlights are anytime you ship something, whether it's a paper game, a module, a board game, a video game, launch an MMO, anything like that. That's the big highlight. That's the, wow, we did this. It's accomplished. Look at that first time that you do a game or a module and you see it on a store shelf and your name is there. That's a big highlight.
That's cool.
Beyond that, especially, I've had real jobs and
wait, qualify that. What do you mean by real jobs?
Well, I've had the kind of, a lot of the, especially, traditional, I was a teacher, and then, going to college and everything, I did all sorts of factory work and this sort of stuff.
Sure.
And so, I've had a real job, and game designing is way better than those, which is not to say it's not hard and it's not a lot of work, and it's not something everybody can do, but it's much more satisfying, like I said, because you get offered you get a range of unusual experiences. Little things happen that you would never be opportunities that come up probably in other areas. Everything from you get to travel to go to game shows and conventions, and those are fun. And you get to meet lots of other gamers and talk to people who are genuinely interested in what you're doing, or have genuinely basically have the same interests as you and stuff. So that's very satisfying. I've basically had little motion capture balls stuck all over my body and run around a motion capture studio so they could test stuff. I had my head scanned and digitized at one point because
That's awesome.
They were like, hey, you want to sit in this thing? Sure, let's have you go ahead and do that, right?
Yeah.
Basically I've done a little bit of audio work, and I've literally sat in a Hollywood soundstage for a week while we were filming scenes for a CD-ROM game that we were working on. You just get the opportunity to do things that are unexpected and fun. Got to take in on a behind-the-scenes tour of the National Aquarium because we had a bunch of artists and our game wasn't going to involve dolphins and stuff. So they said, hey, we know a guy up there. We can have one of the dolphin keepers basically, take us back there and show us and explain things to us.
That's
fun.
Really cool. That's really cool. Yeah. It's working at BioWare, I had some similar experience with yes, it's hard work, but the work is very, very different than the real jobs, as you put it. And I've had a number of real jobs as well. So on the contrast, not focusing on like all of the negative aspects, but what are some, I guess, sobering advice that you might have for aspiring game professionals that is different than the romanticized version of I want to be a game designer when I grow up? How is the actual profession different than one might paint in one's mind?
Well, the sobering advice, and it's not to, like you said, not to be driving people away in fear or anything like that. But yes, it is hard work. There is a lot of work you're going to have to do. It's the sobering advice is there's a lot of drudgery at times that you have to deal with. You'll never know when, like, oh wait, you have to go back and rewrite this whole in a paper RPG and stuff. You have to go back and rewrite sections of a thing a couple of times before it finally gets right. You're going to have to deal with a lot of you're going to have to go out and just basically play it and review it and analyze it a lot. You need a thick skin because people are going to be, you have to put your thing out there before you publish it. You have to get honest criticism. You've got to get people who can give you, the feedback that's like, no, this sucks, or hey, I would not do that in this situation because this is a dumb idea and this is what's going to happen. You have to develop the ability to take that, as painful as it is sometimes, and then go off and say, okay, well, how do I fix that? How do I make that better? Almost nobody gets it right the very first time. You have to basically let yourself get beat up and learn from that and move on, and then apply that information. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff. You need the one thing that people always forget is you need to be professional. Especially new people coming in. It's like, oh wow, I'm a game designer. I can, you got to be professional. Show up on time. Do all those things that regular jobs expect of people. Because it's important. On the kind of the plus but unexpected sides is you are very much quite typically expected to, be a self-starter, manage your own time, solve your own problems, and, take charge and take command of things when you see them come up, so that, you get a lot of freedom to deal with things that you see as long as you're the person who actually is like, okay, I saw that, here's a fix for it, I can do this, and go forward. Sometimes you got to say, I can do this even when you haven't got a clue how you're going to do it.
Right. So focusing on the video game aspect, we talked a little bit about the tabletop, but if somebody wants to join a major video game studio as a designer, what advice do you have for them to start that process?
Wow, that is hard.
Yeah.
So the best things that I know of is get some kind of skill set together. Most importantly as a designer is know how to write. Even if you say, oh, I'm just going to be a guy who's going to be building 3D spaces, know how to write clearly, this sort of thing, because you're going to have to communicate with people. You're going to have to get your this is what I want to have happen across to them in a way that basically they understand and you get what it is that you want. Then if you can learn how to use any of the various common tools, or 3D Max, Maya, or anything like those are obviously much more kind of the art side of things. But get a hold of some of the game editor tools for different games and build stuff. Just build your own mods. Bethesda has all sorts of, they have all the world engine stuff for the Elder Scrolls and the Fallout games. A lot of other companies have their their editing tools, get a hold of Unreal and build things, make stuff. Learn how to make things, whether, start small, make a little, make some new costumes, make some new looks, make a map layer for, Team Fortress, something like that. But, get it done, put it together, try and do it as polished as possible, because that's where you're going to really start learning about, oh, this is what it really takes. This is what I've got to do. This is what I have to think about. After you've done enough of those, you get some that you're pretty proud of, put them out there where other people can see them, can play them, and can criticize them. And, so you can kind of see what kind of feedback, see where you guessed in one direction and maybe you should have guessed the other, that sort of thing. But if you do enough of that, you're building a portfolio of, hey, these are things, these are some game design things I have done. And once you build that kind of portfolio, then you can, target the company that you're interested in, show them stuff that is relevant to the things they do, right? Show them that, hey, I can do stuff that basically fits with where your company is and what it's doing. Go to GDC, go to the various game convention stuff, just to meet people, talk to them, listen, and collect business cards. And don't expect to get hired right away by anybody.
Right? What do you mean?
Persistent, but patient.
You don't get to walk right in and have your corner office, with just by saying, "Hey, I've played video games for 20 years."
Oh God, no. I mean, I tell people right now that I would never, looking back to when I first started in gaming, I would never have been hired today based off of, because, I had the advantage of nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody knew what we were looking for.
Sure.
And so we were inventing it all, right? But, now I've been involved in, doing a lot of hiring, and it's, you start, you have to look for, you need people with skills. You want people, eager, energetic, and you also need to be a good fit,
What do you mean by good fit?
You've got to be a guy that other people want to work with.
Ah, yeah. Well, that's true. There are no islands in the game design process, especially in video games. You do actually have to talk to other people. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You'll spend a lot of your time rubbing elbows with people.
Right, and I think you highlighted kind of the most effective way to get right down to it, which is designing things for your portfolio. The portfolio is absolutely huge. People want to see not what's on a resume, but what you've actually done. And then the other thing, which is how to build up that thick skin, and that's really hard to manufacture. It's really easy to say, no, I have a tough, thick skin, I can handle it, until you get nothing but horrible reviews, and you have nothing but people ragging on your stuff on forums and whatnot. And you can't manufacture that experience. You actually have to go and get beat up a bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's not something that occurs to you. When I'm designing role playing adventures for my my party that comes over, we have our lot of fun. It's a very sterile set of feedback, because they either like it or they don't, but they're there for the suds and the company. They're not giving me genuine feedback on, is this going to stand on its own? When you put it out there for people that don't know you, that's a very different experience.
Yeah, and the other part of that, developing that thick skin, is also learning how to give people criticism too, because you're going to have to be giving feedback on other people's stuff. And you need to learn how to do that in a way that basically gets them to see your point without infuriating them. It's real easy to tell people stuff that it's just annoys and offends them.
Sure. Are there some good outlets?
They won't listen to you.
Right. Now, are there some good outlets for doing that? I know that designing your own modules is great for getting maybe inbound advice, but are there some, outbound opportunities that people can take advantage of to practice their political speech?
Yeah, well, basically go to I would look for basically game review websites, because a lot of them basically, will some of them will have the opportunity to actually write reviews for them. You start writing game reviews because basically you need to explain, hey, this was a good game, this was a bad game, and here's why, right?
Right.
You need to basically kind of present that argument in a way that makes people like, oh yeah, I can see that point, or I agree with you. Good game reviews don't just go like, yeah, this game was crap. That was it. Don't buy it. That tells nothing.
I think that's excellent advice because it hadn't occurred to me to kind of switch the tables to figure out how to give advice. And you've also focused a lot on being able to write clearly and concisely to get your point across. So I think those skills play off of one another. So as you're sharpening your writing sword, you can also do the same for figuring out how to phrase things in a collaborative and constructive way so that other people can benefit from your thoughts as opposed to just flaming them on the web.
Yeah. People listen to you, then you're more effective.
Absolutely. So I guess one of the last questions that I have for you is there a benefit or should people go and get a degree in gaming? Or should they focus mainly on portfolio and game reviews?
No, I think there's a benefit to getting a degree. I think that, like with all things, you need to look at the schools carefully. There are good schools. The advantage to a number of those is depending on the school, they will often specialize in kind of an area or aspect of things, so that if you go to it's the SMU program. They work a lot on actually the scripting and building out levels and working with the editors and tools. There's I can't remember the name of the school. There's the one in Pittsburgh that tends to focus more on production and kind of production training. And so, different schools have kind of like areas that they see that, hey, this is where we can, deal with this stuff. And I think, some focus on the programming side. And then there's, obviously schools that, teach how to use the art tools and, develop really good video game artists and that sort of stuff. And so definitely having one of those is not a bad thing. Just make sure you do your research. Don't believe the TV ads of like, hi, we will teach you how to make games. So tighten up the graphics on level 3 kind of stuff.
Yes, and we will not mention any names. But and I will say from personal experience that though there's mixed reviews, when I was doing my hiring, I would take a second look or read resumes more slowly for people that had a game degree. And for me, it wasn't so much the skill set that they might have so much as it was that they've evidenced a professional interest in the career. And so for me, it was like, okay, if they've dedicated this amount of time, I would hope that they have a broader skill set, but I do know that they are considering this seriously as a career, and so hopefully that showing up on time, being professional, being able to take criticism, playing nice with others, all of those things that you would want from a good work associate, I do tend to look at a degree and slow down a little bit. So it's useful for me as far as what throwing in my 2 cents.
Yeah, and it's the important part. I mean, the fact of the matter is, no school is going to be able to teach you the tools that you're probably going to need actually at the studio where you might wind up, because so many studios have either proprietary engines and tools, or have so customized the existing ones that you're going to have to learn them once you get there. But what we would look at when we saw these things was the demonstration that they know how to learn a tool. They have learned how to use a couple of these tools, and so they have, therefore, useful concepts. They understand the amount of effort it takes. And when we talk to them about like, it's kind of like this, they'll have something we can base this all on. Right.
Well, Zeb, we are heading towards the end of our time today. Are there any closing thoughts or advice that you'd like to offer our listeners looking to get into the game design profession?
Well, my advice is observations are: A, don't do it if you think you're going to get rich.
Great point.
but do it because you can make a good living. It takes time, effort. If you want to go into like paper work or paper design stuff, it's actually a great thing to do as kind of a side business hobby thing for people. A lot of people basically do a couple of projects a year, and they once they build up a reputation, they can basically do contract work for other publishers and these sorts of things. So it's not going to be the end all of their existence. They're going to go off and probably have a lot of jobs in the meantime, but it's fun. It gets a good outlet. For the video game side, it's really hard to get into. There is no magic formula for how to get into the industry. You have to try the things that are going to work for you. The biggest thing is you've got to have something that you can show people. Whether it's a written up document of a game concept with everything kind of worked out, a game design document, or a full on built out mod, you need to have something to show that I know how to do some of this work. I understand kind of the level of effort and detail that is involved in that sort of thing. And then, to get into the video game industry, be prepared to move a lot.
That's a great point as well. Well, Zeb, thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolutely amazing hour, packed full of information. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with us. If our listeners want to find out more about you or more about the projects that you're working on, where can they go?
Well, the projects I'm working on, basically the easiest thing to do is go to elderscrollsonline.com. That's gives a pretty good, clear picture of what we're doing with the Elder Scrolls MMO, and I highly encourage people to check it out. We've got a really good game, and we're continuing forward as soon as we get back to work on Monday. And as for me, I'm told I have a Wikipedia page that I find vastly amusing.
You do? I have that, and I'll have that in the show notes.
Yes. But, I just, worked for a long time. I've, paper games, second edition stuff, these sorts of things. And I'm sure that if they want to, they can find out, whatever information they want about me.
Excellent. Well, Zeb, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been amazing.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You've been listening to another edition of the Gaming Careers Podcast. You can find the show notes for today's episode at thecompanybar.com/podcast. There you can find bullet-pointed notes from the show, links to resources discussed, as well as the extended interview that has even more great content for you that didn't make it into the episode today. That's it for this week. I'll see you next time.